We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to This Song Is Yours, the podcast where we dive deep into the art of songwriting, chat with some of the most exciting artists in the world and explore the stories behind their songs. I'm your host, Simon Fink, and thank you for joining us. Our guest today on the podcast are beloved indie folk band Big Thief. The Grammy-nominated group, now working as a three-piece, have captured the hearts of listeners worldwide with their blend of indie, folk and country sounds, alongside heartbreakingly gorgeous lyricism. Formed in Brooklyn in 2016, the band have released 5 stunning studio records, including the Grammy-nominated Dragon New Warm Mountain, I Believe in You, which personally I count as one of my favourite records of the last decade. This week, Big Thief return with their brand new record, Double Infinity. Recorded at the legendary Power Station studio in New York, the record saw the band rediscover what it means to create music both collaboratively and instinctively. While many artists feel pressured to make albums to meet deadlines or ride a wave of popularity, Double Infinity feels like a record that simply had to be made, a turning point in forging a new path for the band. In today's episode, we are thrilled to welcome guitarist and songwriter Buck Meek to the podcast to chat all about the making of Double Infinity. We discuss the band's original plans to record in quiet solitude and how they ultimately found themselves back in New York surrounded by friends and creatives. We talk about Buck's introduction to songwriting and maybe even when we'll see Big Thief back on Australian shores. Now we want to say a massive thank you to Emma for her help with today's episode and remind everyone that the new Big Thief record, Double Infinity, is out tomorrow. You'll find links in the show notes on where you can purchase the record, follow the band on their socials and grab tickets to their upcoming tour. While you are in the show notes, please make sure you subscribe to This Song Is Yours on whatever podcast platform you use and go and follow us on Instagram and TikTok. It really helps us out and it ensures that you stay up to date with new episodes, new guests, and everything else that we're up to. Now let's get into it. Here is our conversation with Buck Meek from Big Thief. Please welcome to This Song Is Yours, Buck Meek of Big Thief. Buck, hello, sir. How is it going?
Hi. Not too very bad.
That is very, very good to hear. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today to spend some time with us. I'm very excited to, look, to be honest, I was just very excited that we had a new Big Thief record coming out into the world. So I'm even more excited that we've got yourself here to talk about it. Thank you again for your time.
Oh yeah, happy to be here.
Congratulations on this new record. It is called Double Infinity. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous record. Firstly, how are you and the band feeling with putting a new record out into the world? I imagine that that it's obviously an exciting time, but do you guys ever usually come together or do anything special to acknowledge the fact that there's a new record being put out into the universe?
Oh, there's so many little celebrations in the process of making and releasing an album. That's one of my favorite things about being in a band. It's just one constant party. You're just celebrating so many little victories all the time.
I kind of love that though. It is the 6th studio record in the band's catalogue, following on from the beautiful 2022 Dragon New Warm Mountain, I Believe in You. I know that Big Thief has always, I think even from right out of the gate from that first record, have been, I want to say, a darling of the critics, if you will. That obviously it's been something that critics and fans alike seem to absolutely love the band's music. When you're going into making a new record, does that praise, do the Grammy nominations, do those kind of things, do they ever come into play when you are in that creative space and trying to make a new album?
No, they don't come into play. I think the reward for good work is more work, and we're really grateful to have the opportunity to keep working. But every time we start a new project, it always feels like the first time. It feels like, a completely new, completely unknown world that we're just, at the very beginning of understanding.
This is the first record. I want to very quickly acknowledge this is the first record as a trio. And so I imagine that there's almost was there like a feeling almost of a reset, using the words that you just said, like that it's almost like a new experience all over again going into the making of Double Infinity?
Definitely. Yeah, this was a transformation. We parted ways with our bass player of 10 years in the process of writing this album. And we originally set out to record it as a trio, actually, in the woods, kind of in isolation. And it wasn't working. I think we were still kind of in the process of letting go of Max and feeling kind of the echo chamber of our own thoughts. And so we were drawn to go to the city and surround ourselves with a community to kind of reflect like who we are now and where we are now. So we went to New York City and we reconnected with a lot of our best friends from Brooklyn from 10 years ago when we started the band, and also a lot of new friends.
I kind of love that though. The album, which we've been very lucky enough to listen to before it's come out this week, so thank you very much for that. It has this beautiful collective communal kind of sound to it. I think that there's a real energy and magic to this album where you can almost hear that it is I don't think it almost could have been made in isolation in a way, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, we put so much intention into the songs. Adrian wrote the songs over the course of several years, and we co-wrote a handful of them together. We met up for many months together, just the three of us, to fine tune the songs and the repertoire. But then we also chose the musicians very intentionally. But once we were in the room with this group of people, we let go of all control. We didn't give any direction. We just played the songs. They heard them for the first time in front of microphones, and we just captured everyone's reactions. And we were all responding to each other, having those first reactions. And so, yeah.
I find that fascinating because I think it's a very kind of, I imagine it's a very liberating experience and it's a very freeing experience. But then how do you, on the tail end of that, work that down? Because it's a very concise 9 songs on this record. I think you've done very well in selecting the track listing. But then from something that you've got, which does have like a sense of fluidity to it, how does that then go to then making the album and kind of making it cohesive?
Well, I think we always had the intention for this to be a very concise, shorter album. And originally the idea was to make a super heavy rock and roll album. That was kind of our like working concept. Our muse for the last few years really was, we're going to make a rock album, super heavy with screaming and loud guitars and like, and even up until the last minute, that was kind of, it became like more and more of a joke as we collected songs, and they were obviously not like all like these heavy rock songs. But there was something to like this oblique muse that felt useful for some reason in the process. And as we kind of discovered, like, what does rock and roll mean to us right now? And, with songs like Grandmother and just kind of like letting it be what it wanted to be felt actually more rock and roll than forcing it to be like this genre record, and but there was this, it was fun to have like that intention, at least as like as a starting point.
100%. How does that work with, I know you've mentioned some of the songs were co-written, and I think it was Grandma that was the first time that the three of you had written together as a band. Mm-hmm. How does that process work? Because you are all very talented songwriters outside of Big Thief as well, with your own kind of solo projects. And then obviously it works well as a collective in Big Thief, especially for Grandma. How did that process play out in terms of being able to co-write and share that experience together?
Totally. It's a living thing. It's a long, organic relationship that's just constantly shape-shifting. We've been a band for 10 years now. And before that, Adrian and I played as a duo. And when we first started, we were writing a lot together, and then we separated our projects so we could have autonomy. But I think what makes a band, at least in our case, is this friction between the obvious leader, like Adrian has definitely been the guide, she's the visionary, and the songs have like almost primarily been written by her, and at least born from her vision. And we've had various iterations of co-writing or suggesting arrangements or et cetera. But at the end of the day, she needs to be able to sing the song and really believe in it from her own voice in order for it to make the cut. So there is this sense of leadership, but there's also, there's friction because the rest of us are super opinionated and stubborn and also passionate. And so it's always this conversation, and it's not like this equal compromise where we have to water everything down to meet in the middle. You know, there are like roles of leadership, but there's also friction, which I think is what makes it a band. And I think that has just kind of developed over time. And as we've learned to communicate with each other and as we've let go of our own biases, because another power of a band is that, like, of course, we all have our own blind spots and we know each other in ways that we don't know ourselves even, you know, in some ways. And so we're able to call each other out on that. And over the years, basically, we've just built trust. And in this case, Adrienne invited us to write more together because it was kind of happening naturally. And so it proved itself. And then she invited us in over the course of the year leading up to the recording to actually get together and intentionally write some songs together. Grandmother was the first that we like really wrote from scratch together, but there's a handful of others that we helped her finish or wrote a verse or a chorus here and there. And I think at the end of the day, it just felt thrilling. It felt like a raw, new thing that it felt like rock and roll in that way. We didn't really know, we didn't have a roadmap for that. And so it was a way to feel like present and free, I guess, and excited.
It is, I would say it's like audibly palpable that you can kind of hear that there's a almost like abandonment, I think is maybe the best word, but in the best kind of way in terms of both the sonics and also the lyrical content. I think across this record you've got themes or topics that seem to kind of look at the passage of time and maybe the lack of control with that. I think that there's certain themes of like letting go, or that's from an outsider's perspective, obviously. But wondering when you're writing these songs and you're collecting them, and as you said, obviously Adrienne is she has to believe in what she's singing about for it to be true to her and true to the band. How does that play in terms of is there, I guess, is it discussed, or does it just kind of form in the studio when you're putting all these songs together? Is it then that overarching theme is just kind of ever present and kind of reflective of maybe the things that were going on externally?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things about collaboration is that there is this reward system for letting go and compromising what you think, compromising your own ideas, you know, because in any kind of collaboration, you inevitably run up against like having to let go of your own idea. And then at some point, probably if it's a good collaboration, like you see the value in that. You're like, oh yes, I'm so glad I let that go because this is obviously better now, you know? Mm-hmm. And so you start to learn to trust the process of letting go of your own biases and your own ideas. And then you start to also fine tune and come more into touch of like, when do I really, really want to fight for something? Like while I'm learning to value letting go, I'm also like trying to come more into touch with like what do I really believe in? Because like I can't just like be blatantly stubborn about every one of my ideas and kill the vibe. I need to save the really important ones for the right moment to like for that mountain to die on, you know? And so everyone's kind of coming more into touch with that. And you know, that's one of the things I love about being in a band is learning to kind of enjoy the process of letting go. And then that seeps into, I think, even the lyrical aspect of these songs is that everybody starts to kind of dig like having a less precious relationship with their lyrical contributions, you know, and the whole song starts to develop this like sense of levity or something.
Has that process for you personally, I can only ask, you obviously not on behalf of the other members of the band, has that process taken time to be able to kind of get to that point, to be able to let go? Yeah.
Of course, yeah. And we're just starting to, you know, and together. And then there's other times where we, like, the song is perfect. Most of the time, she brings a song to the table and it's just like 100% perfect and ready to go. And we just play.
I kind of love that though. I think that there's something to be said, obviously, that in the band that there is a respect for everyone and the role that they play. And I think that there is something really special about the music of Big Thief. And obviously that is evidenced by the fans and the critics alike, all in love with the music that you guys make. I'd love to talk about the recording a little bit. I think done in the winter in the US, in Manhattan, in Brooklyn, recorded at the Power Station. Is that the studio?
It is, yes.
From a little bit of research, had a quick look, and I think like iconic records like what was it? David Bowie, Let's Dance, maybe recorded there. I think some of Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. I think maybe some key Madonna, back in the day Madonna, the good stuff, if there is good Madonna for some fans. We've spoken to some artists when they go into like very prestigious or studios that have like a history to them, and that they always talk about sometimes, I guess it's maybe mixed results. Some talk about, the energy you feel in the room from the history that it might have, and then some who don't find any of that. Curious for yourselves, was there any ghosts of Springsteen floating around in the background for yourselves, or was it just another studio in a way?
I think the thing beneath all of these iconic artists that we mythologize is just extremely hardworking people. That's the one thing that ties them all together. It's just like the hardest working people out there in music. And I guess what I found in these studios that are attached to that myth is that often they're just extremely high functioning spaces where all the gear works. There's enough space for everybody to play together live in a room with, isolation if you want to isolate, but also sight lines so you can see everybody, and really nice gear, but most importantly, just gear that works, and a staff that really knows how to fix the gear on the fly when it breaks, and clean bathrooms, like the whole thing. It's a very like pragmatic space, really. The power station is just like, and so I think that's one of the reasons so many of these records were made there, is because it's just the space that works. And that's why we chose it, because we had a big band. We needed enough space for everybody, and we needed it to be central to everyone's home in the New York area. And we wanted to record a tape, and they were one of the only studios around that has really high functioning 24 tracks with a staff that can like repair them. And so, yeah, I think it's like more of a pragmatic thing, really.
It's more the tools being used, not necessarily the people on the tools.
Totally.
Yeah. I was wondering if you might indulge me a little bit. I very much loved the title track from the record, Double Infinity. It's about halfway through the record. Has these beautiful kind of hazy guitars almost. And it felt like talking about like collectives or communal kind of groups, that almost had like this group sway to it that I don't know how to audibly describe. And I'm aware to Buck and to other people on this call I'm swaying, but to people listening to the podcast, you can't see me swaying from side to side. Wondering if you might indulge me a little bit and talk about like the creation of that track, or kind of where it was built from.
Totally. Well, so the song Double Infinity actually came to be right before the recording session. We had the title Double Infinity as kind of a working title for almost a year leading up to the session. We knew it would be called Double Infinity. And then right before the session, that Adrian wrote that song like the week prior. And yeah, I think the thing I remember the most from recording that are the three background singers, Elena Spanger, Hannah Cohen, and Alyssa from June McDoom. Were they had kind of a room with Adrienne. The power station is this huge wooden dome, and then it's divided by three big glass walls. And so we kind of divided the whole band into three isolated spaces, but it felt like we were all in a big room together. And Adrienne had her room with the three ladies, and they were sitting there by candlelight with these velvet blankets on these couches, just kind of like with their eyes closed, swaying back and forth for sure. And just kind of creating that sense of depth and movement that I think the song kind of emerged from.
Thank you very much for sharing that. It is a gorgeous track. And as I've said, and will continue to say, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous album. All three of you should be very, very proud of this record. I was wondering if you might indulge us again once a little bit. We're primarily like a songwriting podcast, but I'm curious how you got into songwriting and how you found your way into that kind of art of writing songs.
Oh, thanks. I got into songwriting first as a declaration of love to my high school crush. Wrote her a tune, like 11th grade. And then there was a festival in Texas, or there is a festival called the Kerrville Folk Festival near where I grew up in the Hill Country. You've probably heard of Kerrville on the news because they just had some really catastrophic floods there. But there's an awesome songwriting festival out there in the Hill Country that happens every summer for 18 days on a ranch since 1972. And it's just a gathering of songwriters sharing their original material around campfires. And I started going there when I was maybe 14 or 15 years old. And that community really just brought me and treated me as a peer and encouraged me to write my first songs, and kind of gave me like an audience in the community to talk about songs and songcraft. And I, still when I write, every time I write a song, I'm like writing for Kerrville, for the people that I know I will sing the song for there at some point,
I absolutely love that. That's incredible. As this is not to, I'll make very clear, this is not to pitch you against anyone else, because that's not what we're in the business of. But curious, is there anyone, are you the most prestigious member to come out of that kind of songwriting community in the town, or has it kind of spawned other well-known songwriters as well?
The Kerrville Folk Festival?
Yes, yeah.
Or, no, the Kerrville Folk Festival is super prestigious. Like this, so many of the great, like, outlaw songwriters, like Towns Van Zandt was there all the time back in the day, and Blaze Foley played there a lot, Guy Clark, and a lot of their old friends are still there every year, and a lot of songwriters that no one's ever heard of, who are just carpenters and masons and plumbers and stuff, greatest songwriters you've ever heard in your life, are still camping out there every summer singing their tunes. And but yeah, so many greats come out of there.
That's incredible. I would last question about it, I promise. Do they allow attendees, or is it just songwriters?
Oh yeah, it's just a big open festival. They have one stage where they have shows on the weekend. Songwriters play on the stage, but then mostly it's just a big campground that's totally open to the public. And there's a bunch of camps where people, set up a little kitchen and a campfire, and then at nighttime everybody wanders. Every camp is just kind of wide open. You can just wander around. It's almost like a village of songwriting camps, and you can just walk into anybody's camp with your guitar and sit down and join the circle. And it can get pretty kumbaya for sure, but like it's a really beautiful scene. And then every night, if you walk around enough, you'll just stumble upon some of the most beautiful songs you've ever heard.
That's incredible. That sounds absolutely incredible. I'm going to have a look, maybe book some tickets from Australia, see what we've got next year.
Yeah, check it out. You love it.
I'm aware that Big Thief is about to head out onto tour through September and November across the US. I am curious, from this new record, is there a band favorite that you guys are kind of excited to transform in that live space and kind of play for audiences?
We're actually going to play my hometown, Wimberley, Texas. There's a little opera house there in an old, it's actually like a fake Western town, like a facade movie set of an old gun shooter town. And there's this little opera house there that I grew up. It's on this beautiful river spot there in Wimberley, Texas, at this place called Pioneer Town. And we're going to play the opera house to raise money for the Wimberley watershed, which is there's this beautiful aquifer beneath the Texas Hill Country that provides all these cold spring rivers and creeks, and it's super threatened by all the development. And so my friend David Baker has an organization called the Wimberley Watershed. We're going to play a benefit concert for them, but I'm really stoked for that show.
That'll be incredible. Look, I've read a lot of stuff online from fans who are excited to kind of catch you on the US across the next few months. So we'll have links to all your tour dates in today's podcast show notes. Look, it does lead me to a bit of an obvious question, one that I feel that I do have to ask on behalf of Australian fans and myself, because we'd very much love to know, can we maybe expect to see you guys back down here in Australia in support, maybe next year, in support of the record?
Oh, for sure. We're putting it together at some point in the near future. And I love playing Australia. Some of my favorite venues in the world are in Australia. We work with a great promoter, BT of Love Police. BT's the man. He's booked us at some really cool spots, like the Eltham Hotel out in the Northern Rivers, I think. And also what's that spot we played? Minion Townhouse, or the town, some super cool spots. I've still never made it out to Cooper Petty, but I'd like to play out there one of these days.
Look, we will try and just manifest that into the universe today. We'll try and get you to as many Australian towns and cities and spots across the country, because I know that there would be fans who want to come see you and who will come to these shows regardless. So look, when they are announced again, we'll make sure that we promote them across the pod socials. Buck, I do want to ask, we usually kind of wrap things up with, I guess, asking what they're currently listening to. For yourself, is there anything that's on high rotation at the moment?
I've been listening to Ryan Davis and the Roadhouse Band, new album. Incredible album. Just heard that for the first time a couple of days ago, and it really blew my mind.
I've heard very, very good things about that album. So yeah, very, very excited to check out any any key track, not to put you on the spot, but any key track that might be the one that is the one worth checking out?
And the title track, New Threats from the Soul, is killer. I also love The Simple Joy.
Absolutely love that. Well, we'll be checking that out after this. But in the meantime, Buck Meek, thank you very much for coming onto the podcast. I do appreciate it. Congrats on that new Big Thief record. It is called Double Infinity. It's out this week when people are listening to our conversation. But thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening.